Thank you very much. Wow. So, thank you for the technical team who spent the last half an hour trying to get some slides up on there. So it's not going to work quite how I expected. But we'll make this as interactive as we can. So first of all, let's just get a sense. Who here's actually built an agent? Wow. Okay. So, and how many of those are live in production? Couple. Okay. Okay. That, by the way, that's normal. I mean, I think the ratio is about 10 to 1 in terms of the number of agents that have been built versus those that are in production, that are actually made it into production. So there's clearly an issue that we've got in terms of confidence. Okay, so we're moving into a world which is obviously very challenging in terms of agents are transforming businesses. I was at a round table this morning where we had some lawyers going, our business model's basically broken. We charge by the hour, but of course now hours are going to be a lot cheaper with AI. So there's a lot of people rethinking business models, the same for consultants. And change is quite uncomfortable. So you can all do something for me. Can you all put your hands out like that, both hands out? And then put your fingers together, and then close your fingers together, and then look at which thumb is on top. Sorry for those who've gone interactive, I've got to put my coffee down, okay, all right. So if your left thumb is on top, have a look. You're more likely to be successful, a better lover. And I'm just joking, actually. There's no data around that at all, but look at which thumb's on top, take your hands apart, and then put your hands back together and put the other thumb on top. How's that feel? Weird, doesn't it? And that's what change is like. It's going to be weird, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'd feel in terms of putting those things. But that's what we're moving into, the whole world of how difficult change is going to be for some people. Some people will embrace it. Some people will love it, other people will be very hesitant, and therefore a lot of the business skills or the skills we need around agents are probably about actually how do we engage people on where they are and where they need to get to. Okay? So, I have some slides. There's a QR code there, so you can get to all the slides. You don't have to take a photograph now, the QR code is at the end as well, but sometimes people feel the slides are useful. Okay. So only a few of you have built agents, so I think probably it's better to start and say, okay, let's look at the anatomy of an agent. So you have an agent, depending on which platform you're using. If you're using Salesforce, they have an intermediary thing called a topic, but essentially you have an agent, and an agent has two things. It has instructions, what it's meant to do, and actions, what it's able to deliver. So that might be a workflow, it could be Apex in terms of code, it could be a prompt, it could be an API. And that's pretty much how all the agents are structured. Whether you go to Microsoft, you go to Crew AI, you go to ServiceNow, or Agentforce with Salesforce. So they all have a basic principle, which is you need to tell it what to do, and you need to give it access to some things, some workflows or actions that it's meant to be. Even better, look at that, thank you. So if that's the basic anatomy, we need to think about how we construct these things. Now, you need to think about an agent as being like a 12-year-old, pretty much. Yeah, really enthusiastic, but takes everything literally. I said to my son, why are you eating chocolate? He said, it's a Wednesday. I'm like, what do you mean it's a Wednesday? He said, well, you said on Tuesday not to eat chocolate. That's not what I meant. I meant, on Tuesday, I said you shouldn't eat chocolate all week. He said, oh, but you didn't say that. You said on Tuesday don't eat chocolate, and today's a Wednesday. So we need to think quite carefully about actually how we phrase these things. Because essentially, we're programming with a natural language here. And language, as we all know, is fairly ambiguous. I think we're also suffering a little bit from the early days of, say, ChatGPT, where we gave it 2 sentences and it wrote us a poem. It's magic. Okay? That's fine because the answer of the poem, we don't care what it is. We don't care what, it's non-deterministic. When we want it to say book a flight, or go and schedule a call, or update a record, we want it to be a lot more accurate. Okay? So we need to think a lot more carefully about how we build these things. Okay? And I think the problem we've all had is that you have the ideation, people come up with all these ideas for use cases, and we're not quite sure what to put in because we're not sure what the instructions to put in. And we end up with this unreliable agent, and then we end up with this lack of hands going up, we've got things into production. Is that fair? Is that what you're seeing? We've got eight agents currently in production and another 8 that are being built. The last agent, generally from idea to production, was 37 minutes. And you go, wow, that's amazing. Well, it kind of isn't. It was expenses policy FAQ. We had a really good policy document. We knew how to build agents. We had all the infrastructure. It doesn't take very long to get those things together. A more complex agent, something like a sales coach, probably took us about a week. But these things can be done if you have a repeatable approach, and that's what I want to spend some time talking about. How do we get the reliability in? This is nothing about how quickly you can build an agent, it's how quickly you can get an agent from idea through to production where people trust it and use it. Because if we can't get it used, it kind of doesn't matter. Is this making sense? This is not meant to be me shouting at you. If there are questions, please put your hand up and we'll jump in. Very happy to turn this into a longer conversation, because I know we've got other people in the room who've got, again, a ton of skills around building agents potentially. So I think the other thing people kind of miss when they think about the agents are magic, is they don't think about an agent being digital labor. If you think of it not as a replacement for humans, but maybe actually supporting humans, think about what we get, the human life cycle. We have a job spec, we recruit them, that might be the use case, we onboard and train them, and then we monitor and coach them, and we either sack them or we promote them based on some skills. If we think about an agent's kind of the same. We have to design it, we have to build it, and then we have to govern it. And we have to think about that life cycle in the same way as we probably think about instructing a human. So, I'm old, and in the 1990s, we didn't have computers. Weird, really. And we all had ISO 9000 manuals, if you remember those, which were the procedure manuals for how to do things. My first job as an intern was, here are a bunch of photocopies, go and replace, for every manual, go and replace page 7, page 50, it's the same as update. Page 7, page 53, 108. And we recognized that actually all of that didn't work very well because people didn't read them, they didn't understand them, and suddenly the whole concept of mapping business processes came out. Suddenly life became a lot easier, people had a better understanding about how to do things. And the whole of the business process re-engineering wave was driven really by process mapping. So who here remembers that? Oh, a few of you, fantastic, okay, good. We seem to have fallen into the same trap all over again. We're saying, okay, we need these agents to actually do tasks, but instead of actually thinking about the task they want to do, let's just start typing in instructions. And every time they get it wrong, we just add some more instructions, and then add some more instructions, and add some more instructions. And I think that's the root cause of the fact they're not very reliable. Because we're actually not thinking through them from first principles what we want to do and thinking about how we architect them. And I think this is a big challenge for all of them, because there's a field called instructions, so you just start typing in there rather than taking a step back and going, okay, what actually do we want it to do, and architecting it. Okay? So the first thing we said was like, we're going to have multiple agents, and agents are going to have multiple topics, skills, if you will. So think about a human has multiple skills. Over time, we want to teach the agent more skills. So we think about here, we've got, this agent's got, 8 skills. It's got some general FAQ stuff. It's a vacation assistant, it's a recruitment assistant, help desk, sales coach, and so on. So depending on the platform you're using, if it's Salesforce, then that's one agent in multiple topics. If you're using another platform, each one of those may be a separate agent. But think about, okay, what skills does my person or my agent need? And then we start to structure them that way. Okay? Who is already doing this sort of stuff? Some of you? None of you. Okay, all right. Right, so let's get into a bit more detail. So if I think about one of those particular jobs to be done, JTBD, jobs to be done, this is our general FAQ. And you might go, well, FAQs are really easy. You just like throw the data in there and add an agent and you've got an FAQ. And the answer is, it may be that simple, and maybe in the example of my 37 minutes, my expenses FAQ. But this one is about HR policy. And our organization has both a US and a UK entity, and all the employees are associated with those two, so the policies are different. So the first step is, like, did they say what country they're in? If not, the yellow one is an action that says, go and find what country you're in, because it goes to our employee database and finds what country you come from. And then it points you to either the UK documentation or the US, or if you're a contractor and you're not actually either of those, it sends you around the loop and actually catches some feedback. So not a particularly difficult agent, but writing all those instructions just by trying to just type them in is really hard. What we've discovered is if you draw this diagram, and if I had access to a computer where I could show you, we could also generate the instructions straight off the back of that. And then a couple of really interesting things happen once you've got that. You've now got some sort of audit trail. You've now got a way of driving yourself around that cycle as things improve. So let's see. So if we think about sort of the cycle, and again, the picture top left is that diagram I just showed you. bottom right is happens to be agent builder, but it doesn't matter what the platform is. So coming out of the top one, user stories, you may have to go and build some automations you haven't already got. Agents aren't just magic. They need to do something. If you need to go and collect a record, you may need a workflow. If you want to post a record, if you want to go and, say, summarize some data, you may need a prompt template of some sort. So they may not exist in your organization. You need to go and build those. So you may need to build some user stories so to task that work. Yes? Number two, we can then generate the instructions and the guardrails. So once you've taken that process diagram, you've then got a very succinct set of instructions that can get pasted into your agent. And you can also, obviously, look at some of the tests. You can start to think about the different scenarios. Because again, a lot of people, when they're thinking about an agent, they think about the happy path. They only think about the way that works, not all the other paths that you could go through. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of different feedback loops. So again, when you're thinking about testing, think about the different scenarios you could go through. And then number four is when you're testing, it's not working, there's feedback. Don't go and fiddle around with the instructions. Come back to the diagram and go, why didn't this work? Let's go and change that. Regenerate the instructions, and then you've ended up with an audit trail of some things that are happening. And this all sounds like really obvious. And to be honest, we started with just tapping instructions, and we nearly gave up and went, this is too hard. And went, hang on, we're a process mapping product, and we didn't think about using our own product, used it, and went, oh, suddenly it works. But this very simple approach of driving around this cycle suddenly gave us a couple of things. It gave us reliability, but it also gave us the ability to drive some form of governance around this cycle. And if I think about the comment I made at the very beginning, which is, the issue we haven't got is a technology issue. I think we've got one is a confidence issue. I don't want to put this thing live. So let me just... So there's some thoughts there about why a process diagram. So obviously the first thing is you can engage some business users. It's a lot easier to put a diagram up in front of people like you rather than putting you 1,000 or 100 lines of instructions going, what do you think about that? And the answer is, I kind of don't know. The second thing is you can do a bit of architecture. What is an instruction versus an action versus a guardrail? So people happy about those terms? Yeah. Actions, that could be a workflow. Instructions are the textual, if this, then when you find this, then do that. And then guardrails are often standards, like this is how emails formats are. This is, don't do these things. But again, so often people put a lot of guardrails in. Don't have inputs for vacation days that are less than half a day. Well, that may be a guardrail, or that might actually be part of the workflow and therefore part of the instruction. And I think the other, it's generating unambiguous instructions. So if you keep on just banging more instructions in, eventually the large language model gets confused, and also you end up with conflicts or you may with gaps. If you've got 3 instructions to say, if you discover this, do this. The agent's going, I'm not sure which, they're all 3 there, I'm not sure which to use, and suddenly you start to drive a lack of reliability in there. So you can even look, we've built an agent that will look at the diagram and tell you this won't work, almost like a pre-compiler, and go, you've got some conflicts here, you need to go and fix those. And again, if we had some technology, I could have shown you some of those things. I'll do that through the medium of dance, maybe a bit later. The other thing about debugging instructions, so if it's not working, go back to the diagram and go, okay, why isn't it working? Yeah, I didn't use the right word there. We had a big problem with that vacation, not the vacation one, the frequently asked questions, where it kept on giving us Canadian policies. I went, why is it giving us Canadian policies? And we put the Canadian policies, not our. So it went onto the internet and went and found Canadian policies. Of course, we don't have any. But again, just 1 or 2 words make quite a lot of difference. Trying to pick those out of 100 lines of instructions is really hard. But going back to the diagram and going, OK, that's where it went wrong. I can understand that. OK? I think probably the biggest thing here, and it's underrated, is I can now explain its behavior and get sign-off. Now, you've got to accept that these things aren't necessarily going to be 100% all the time. I mean, no employee is 100% all the time. We're not training and testing agents. I think we're evaluating them the same way you'd evaluate an employee. And then you take a risk-based judgment going, yeah, that'll work. You look at some employees and go, not customer facing, I don't think. I think we'll make you sit in the back office. So there's that kind of thing about, okay, where do we actually, are we comfortable getting this agent live, but being able to explain the behavior. A story I've been telling recently is, who's been in a Waymo? Self-driving car? A couple of you? It's really weird. You get in there, it's like, there's a steering wheel and it turns. No. And it looks like an ordinary car, and it's going down the road, and it kind of, there's lots of things which are okay. And I live in San Francisco, and if you've been there a lot, they're driving around all the time. They started off with people in them, then they didn't have a driver, and they still drive around quite happily, and you kind of got confident they're not going to bump into things. By the way, you can bully them, because it takes longer in a Waymo than it does a taxi, because if you cut them up, they stop. So you can bully Waymos by just like pulling in front of them. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, after you. Anyway. I digress, as usual. But Waymos, you get in a Waymo, kind of the infrastructure works, you know what they're trying to do, you understand how roads work, you could even look on your Google map and check they're going where you're expecting. If I then put you in a Waymo and blacked all the windows out, or put a black hood on your head, are you less comfortable or more comfortable? Probably less comfortable, because you've no idea where it's going. Don't worry, just get in, the windows will go black, when we get to the other end, it'll all unlock the doors and you can get out. And that's kind of where we are with agents if we don't have any way of describing how they work to senior management. And by the way, saying, don't worry, it's magic or it just works isn't good enough. I think in a year or two that may be different when we're comfortable with these. But at the moment, we've got to get over this confidence hump. And that means picking simple use cases that are demonstrable and an approach which is reliable and consistent. And this process-driven approach absolutely works. I had someone say to me the other, it's cheating. Why is it cheating? It's like, because you're telling it what to do. No, I'm trying to think about what the outcomes are going to be. That's not cheating. It's like, say, giving a new intern and going, here's the phone, go and talk to some customers, and if you get lucky, great. If not, I'll give you some instructions. That's almost the analogy we've got at the moment with agents, and I think if we're not careful, we'll end up falling over the other side and going, people just don't believe this technology works at all. And that clearly isn't true. So those people who get it to work will have a massive competitive advantage. And the last one, I mean, for those of you who are in a highly regulated industry, demonstrating some level of compliance. We've all had process maps for driving compliance for the last, 20 years, 30 years. So this is no different. Or maybe it is different because it's even high risk. So we've got a lot more at stake here in terms of reputational risk and security risk. Is this all making sense? Okay. This stuff's not difficult to do. It genuinely isn't. We were surprised. We went from this will never work to, wow, we've got this working probably 2 weeks in terms of thinking about the approach. Before I go there, so let's think about some of the use cases that people have been thinking about. So people here are already thinking about agents. What are the use cases that you're thinking about? So customer success emails and response. So is that supporting a rep? It's not sending the email out automatically. It's supporting whoever's sending it.
Or could do if you tested enough that you're confident that your brand voice.
Okay, so happy at the moment, it's an email with a human in the loop. And then if you're confident that it's consistent, then we could start to make it more autonomous. Okay? So that's great because that's doing stuff. It's collecting a bunch of data from different sources to try and formulate that email, which is what agents are great at, which is actually pulling data together. That's interesting. And appointment scheduling for what industry?
For like the legal industry, if they want to schedule a meeting with a client, having an AI agent reach out to them rather than back and forth phone calls, trying to coordinate using the calendar that they already have for their firm, connecting to client like that.
Okay. Okay, so appointment scheduling where you've got the calendars, so we're working off good data because it's calendar data, and therefore it can be quite deterministic in terms of, we've booked a time, and then I think the agent then can have a bit of a conversation about, like, what do you want, can I help you set up exactly who you want to go and talk to and why, okay? Go on. Yeah, so there was a question there about from a legal perspective, I think we had a session earlier where actually the job of a paralegal is at risk, because a lot of the work of a paralegal is actually sifting through lots of data, pulling out precedents, trying to get some understanding how to formulate a case. So yeah, I mean, and then the knock-on effect of that is, well, if we don't have paralegals, how do junior lawyers get into the, and how do we start to grow those? So we've got quite a lot of changes, I think, that are happening that are not technology at all, but they're actually about people-related things. So use cases from this side of the room. Sorry? The hospital discharge process. Can you explain that a bit more?
Typically, for a patient who's being discharged from the hospital, there's a number of sign-offs and documentation requirements that require somebody to run around to various doctors and nurses to check all the boxes, and often the discharge process could take several hours because of that. I think an agent could reach out and get those approvals and document it much quicker.
Excellent. Other thoughts from this side of the room? I think let me draw some different streams from that. Quite often when I talk to people, they go, "Oh, that agent you built, that's just workflow. Why don't we just build a workflow?" I mean, that discharge process, it could be a workflow. Someone fills out a form and it takes you to the next page, the next page, the next page. And there's for those people building agents, they want everything to be an agent. And those people who think they're really a bad idea don't want any of them, they want to be workflow. And I think there's a balance there. And you need to think about what some of the criteria are, which would be, this would be a good candidate for an agent. And quite often it could be workflow bookended by an agent. The first bit of it is, okay, I want to ask you some questions, but then I'll do some workflow, and then maybe I'll summarize the results, and I'll use an agent to summarize the results. So it isn't just one or the other. The example we had was a vacation. We built an agent for people to track their vacation. The vacation's all tracked inside our own systems. So if people want to book PTO, they could go to a form and fill it out and so on. And we built it as an agent, and people went, why did you do that? Well, first of all, we wanted to build some agents to build the muscle of actually being able to build agents. So we wanted to pick stuff which we knew the process really well. We already had workflows. We already knew how it worked. But also we discovered that with an agent, we don't need to know what the terminology is. I could say, I want time off. I booked a holiday. I've got PTO. I was off last week. There are lots of different ways you can get into that piece of workflow. So there are benefits, which is your customers or employees or partners don't need to know your terminology. They don't need to know your process. They don't need to know your forms. It's a nice, easy on-ramp. The other interesting thing is at the back end is the agent won't let you get away with putting in bad data. So you know it's a mandatory field, you just put 3 dots. Okay, it won't let you do that because it's saying, no, I need to know that's not a valid holiday. That's not a valid reason for going on holiday, 3 dots. Can you give me a valid reason? So we're seeing that there are examples where it may improve the quality of it. So back to your discharge process, the doctor can't just go, was ill. No, what was the real reason they got discharged and so on. So you could see where it can improve the quality. And I think the piece in the middle is interesting, which is because we're programming with natural language, some of that workflow that we're building, changing that or managing or maintaining it simply by changing the diagram, actually is a form of programming. And if I go back to my roots of BP, business process management, the holy grail was we draw a diagram and it builds an application. And we went, that'll never happen. It actually is now. That's where we've got to, with all the implications of we need to understand how to actually make the stuff work properly. Other thoughts of use cases? You guys must be working with customers. What's a use case? Yeah. Lost and found.
Whoa. I got the power. Customer's a bus company. They take a lot of customer service cases of people calling constantly saying, hey, I lost a red hat on bus 47. Can you find it for me and let me come pick it up?
That's a really simple use case, but so elegant. Yeah. Okay. I think one of the things we're discovering. You done?
That's basically the whole story.
I think what's really interesting is that once you start building agents, you end up building sort of a muscle about how to build agents. And that starts to drive out some really interesting use cases you never thought of. Our company, we've got to the situation now where our org chart has agents on it. So you look at the org chart. Our customer support team have got very few staff, but quite a few agents. We've used something called Intercom for our customer support. But some really interesting things come out of that, which is we've got a Japanese reseller, and they said, could you translate all your support material into Japanese? We went, done. Because if you go to Intercom and you ask a question in Japanese, AI translates it to English, looks at our support articles in English, finds the answer, turns it back into Japanese, and gives it back out in Japanese. So it'll do it in any language. And it's really good. We've got 82% successful completion rate on that. And that number's climbing because every time it doesn't do it successfully, it tells us and we go and write a support article or we go and fix something. So that number has just been climbing because our support team don't answer support queries anymore. They're making sure they're staying ahead and they've got a governance cycle around how they do the support materials. So there's another thing to think about, which is if you're building agents, you need to build that feedback mechanism so you can understand how to go and improve them and sort of governance framework. That whole principle of we're building that sort of agent muscle, and now people think first going, I'm sure an agent can do that, and if it can't, they're slightly disappointed and go, I've got to do it myself. But we're now going with an agent force type thinking, which is surely an agent could do that, and I think that's where we need to try and get to in terms of the culture. Not everybody in your organization is going to be like that. Not everyone's going to be like, absolutely, I want to teach this thing to do my job, because I think that's the natural fear. But at the moment, I think we're working on how do we use agents to support people rather than replace people necessarily.
Were you aware of this?
Thank you. Are you aware of this Wall Street Journal article? It came out a few months ago. I think the company was State Farm, which was a client of mine once upon a time. But it stated that during the claim call or the claim triage process, the agent actually responded in a more empathetic way than humans because it extracts no emotion, right? If you're having a bad day, someone calls about a claim, and your dog died yesterday, you may not be in the best position to be empathetic. Have you read this?
I did see the article,
Yeah.
yes, actually, and I think it's quite interesting. Again, back to thinking about how, when you write your instructions, one of the things you can write, which is the tone of voice that you want to respond in.
Yeah.
We wrote, again, sorry I can't show you, but for Salesforce they had a very swanky Women in AI drinks party in New York, and they wanted a drinks mixologist. So we built that agent for them and took about a day to build it. But again, it had a certain style, which is, and it's really good. The agent went, if the person's been quite short with their answers, be quite short with with their questions, quite short with how you're talking. So if you want to have a longer conversation about exactly where did the gin come from and what are the berries, it will have that conversation with you. If you go, gin and tonic, I need one right now, it's really quick and it deals with it. And again, just some phrasing about the way we actually set it up and said, you are a mixologist, but you will match the tone. Yeah, there's some quite clever things we can now do, but again, you've got to get started to start to explore how those things work. Yeah. The other thing, obviously, from a support agent, you change some policies, and the agent's instantly giving you exactly the same policies. So it's not like you've got 100 support agents and they've all got to remember to read the email about how things have changed. So there are some benefits in consistency, and as you say, in terms of, yeah, they're always having the same day. They're not having a bad day or a good day. The agents are all the same. I'm worried at the moment about doing lots of customer-facing agents, because that's the buzzy. Everyone's like, it could be amazing. If they're really narrow use cases, maybe. But my suggestion, if you're starting, we need to start at employee level. Okay? Employees will give you feedback if they don't work. Employees will give you feedback if they don't work. They'll be a lot more forgiving if it doesn't work quite the way they expected. They'll definitely give you feedback. So if we think about the different tiers, which are going from employee, then partner, reseller, maybe volunteer if you're in the non-profit space, then customers who love you, customers, prospects, and maybe competitors at the top. Let's aim down at the bottom, and let's aim for the lower risk ones. People seem to be like hitting for the home run and going, we're going to do customer success for any prospect. And that really is that's high risk from a credibility perspective, from a liability perspective. And I think, again, doesn't help us in terms of getting that confidence of getting things working.
Before I left my CIO role, we came up with 12 use cases. We was working with Microsoft down in Atlanta at the Microsoft Technology Center, and we were exploring mostly internal use cases. There were 1 or 2 customer-facing use cases. And then fast forward to October, after I left my position, I'm on a panel in Nashville. One of the people on the panel was the CXO, Chief Experience Officer, of one of the large credit card companies. And he was telling this story about their rollout of a customer-facing chatbot, AI chatbot. And we got to the conversation after the panel, so we dug in a little bit deeper. And he shared with us, those of us that were on the panel, that their initial deployment of that AI chatbot, the accuracy rate of the information presented back to the customer was 75%. My response immediately, I didn't say it out loud, was, oh my gosh, that's not good. He was giddy that they achieved 75%. Because he said that they built into the AI agent almost a self-governance of itself, in that if the probability of inaccuracy got to a particular level, they transferred the chat to a phone call. Does this sound familiar to you?
Yeah, but
I was astounded that he was so happy.
That's way more sophisticated than most of the people I'm seeing at the moment. But yeah, absolutely, that's the bigger. I think the big corporates actually have got the money to do this stuff. If I just move on, if that's all right. I stopped when we were talking about process diagrams. You don't have to draw them from scratch anymore. AI will draw them for you. We built an agent that's actually a business analysis agent. It will chat to you about your use case and then draw the first cut of the diagram. It's not perfect, but it's better than having a blank sheet. You could start from a sketch, start from a whiteboard. AI will happily now take a diagram, a whiteboard, and draw the diagram, or a transcript. So have a call with a conversation with a customer, take the SOP from their statement of work if you're a consultant. It will try and make sense of what the client thought they wanted from a template or a blank screen. So we're no longer just drawing things from a blank screen. I won't show you. But I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and people said, these agents are really hard to build, and I'm not sure we're really ready for them. And I went, well, that's strange, because we think they're really easy to build. And they went, oh, you're very arrogant. I said, well, I'm not arrogant, I'm right, which is slightly different. But the point is that we have some of these foundations in place. And most of the people in the audience, a lot of them were Salesforce, and therefore they had got away with building poor systems, because Salesforce doesn't punish you too badly. Agents absolutely punish you. So things you need to have in place. You need some agreed business processes. Again, those of you who are in highly regulated organizations, you're way ahead of everybody else because you've got this stuff written down and you know how it works. You need strong data governance and quality. And again, conversations about data, it's no longer just data sitting in tables. It could be PDFs. It could be policy documents. And again, are those policy documents suitable for AI to read? Are there nuances there? Are there assumptions in there that AI gets confused about? So again, there's a little bit of an audit, not just in terms of the data in databases, but also some of the other data. We're seeing some interesting use cases around video. Walk around a car, where before it's a truck company. Walk around the truck before the new driver takes over. It can look at the video. It knows what dents look like. So it will it'll write up the report and say, this is the state of the truck when you picked it up. When you deliver it back, take a photograph, and then take a photograph in the back to say, is it fully stocked for the next driver? Simple agent. But Gemini's great at analyzing video. So again, we need to think beyond just the hard data. And I think if you narrow down the use case, the data you need to try and fix is fairly manageable. Actually, that was in, it was a lawn care franchise where they had multiple vans, and then the next driver would take the van over, but then they had the deal was the van driver had to leave it with fully stocked for the next driver. But you could think about in the future, we all have our own personal agent. Everyone of us rents cars, and you come back and you give the car back and go, I hope they don't find something, make something up. Yeah, you could have your own personal agent. You just go around the car, and I know we all do that automatically, but why wouldn't it write the report for you? And then email it to the rental company. Go, this is where it was when it started. This is when it finished, and there's no differences. So we've even got. You could end up building your own personal agents. Just a thought. So strong data, and then the other one is well-documented metadata.
I have a question regarding. So you mentioned confidence, like lack of confidence to create an agent. I think one piece of that is because the pricing model is so different to your normal subscription. I think that's also part of like, I don't really know how much this is going to cost me. So are there any lessons learned or recommendations or a framework of guidance in terms of when I'm trying to build an agent, how can I package it in a way that I can, in a way, have a sense of how much it's going to cost me and how much ROI I'm going to get out of it so I can roll it out?
That's a great question about pricing. So a couple of things. One is, at the moment, I don't actually care how much it costs. I know that sounds really weird, but at the moment, think of this as a training cost. We need to get into building agents. So we're building small, narrow agents. It kind of doesn't matter how much it costs, provided we're starting to build that muscle and understand how it works. I know that sounds like a bit of a silly answer, but when we started 3-4 months ago, we had no skills. We had no idea what it's going to cost. But it was fairly limited. We had a narrow scope. We knew it wasn't going to get, it wasn't customer facing with everybody hitting it. It was employee facing. We had an understanding about what it's likely to be. So it gave us those skills. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is, for those of you who had mobile phones when they first came out, again, a small subset of this audience, but you remember you chose your phone based on the call plan, if you remember. You went, I'll use Vodafone because they've got 5 family and friends, and then they went, do you need 2 gigabytes for going abroad? It's like, I don't know what a gigabyte is, so I guess so. And I think we're that at agents at the moment. We've got lots of different agent platforms charging in different ways. Give it another 6 months a year, I think we'll start to optimize on what everyone whether it's by transaction or whether it's by just a flat fee or however that works. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing associated with that is, if we think about Salesforce themselves, everyone's going, oh, it's $2 a transaction, it's $2. Well, it kind of isn't. It is if it's customer facing. But if it's employee facing, it's just a per user license. So it doesn't matter how many agents you have, and it doesn't matter how much they're used. So all our employee facing agents, we've just paid a license fee for every person who accesses as many agents as you want. You know those 8 I had up there, and the next 10, it doesn't matter. And then you pick use cases. So our first customer facing use case is helping a customer write a testimonial. They want to write an App Exchange review, or they want to write a G2 crowd review, and they're sitting at a blank screen, I don't know what to write. We've got an agent, we'll go, well, I'll coach you through it if you want. So would I pay $2 to get a customer to write a testimonial? Absolutely. But again, very narrow use case. Not everyone's going to be hitting it. It's an acceptable level of risk. So I think that's the game we're playing at the moment. And I think the employee-facing, lower-risk use cases that are not high volume make it easier to start to get some mechanisms for ROI.
So do you think that should be included in that governance underlying piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I talk about the governed implementation lifecycle, the very beginning of the implementation lifecycle starts with ideation, it then starts with business analysis, and part of that is trying to work out what the ROI is. Absolutely. We have this long list of use cases, and we're going to go, let's work out what the relative risk is, which ones we're going to pick off first, and then what the ROI associated with those are to work out whether they're worth doing. And over time, as the costs come down, some of those which were never viable suddenly become viable. Our own internal products, we're a process mapping and metadata management product, we've got AI in there. And when we first started, the CFO said, how are you going to charge people for all the AI tokens? And we went, well, we don't know, really. And we basically kicked that can down the street long enough, and eventually it was irrelevant because the cost of tokens was so low, it would have cost us more to actually invoice somebody and work out how to do it than the actual cost of the tokens. So the cost of these agents, or the underlying infrastructure of the agent, is going to tend to zero. It's going to get cheaper and cheaper. And then we're maybe just paying for the platform. So we're paying for an agent building platform, and then we build as many agents as we want. So a long answer to a very short question, but at the moment I don't know, but I think it will optimize where all the different platforms will eventually go, this is how we charge. So I talked about processes, I talked about quality. The other one is well-documented metadata. If we're building actions, we want these agents to take action, and we're using our existing workflows, we better make sure we understand how they work and that we've got some way of managing them. So let's take a scenario. You've got a workflow that's been used internally, but you also went, that'd be really useful for an agent to use. And then that gets used by another agent, because we're not going to have one, we're going to have multiple agents. And that's great, you've got 4 or 5 of these things. And then one of the admins go, oh, that flow, I need to change it for my internal use. They may never know that they've broken an agent. If it's internal, they'll know it's broken because an employee will go, that kind of doesn't work. But the agent will probably just work around it and go, well, that wasn't right, but I'll just work around it. So we've actually got a higher level of risk now associated with just the way we're building systems and reuse of data. So if you remember at the beginning of that slide, I talked about agents are really hard. They're not hard, but they are forcing a series of disciplines that maybe we don't already have. And if you're not building agents, you need to get some of this stuff together so you're ready for agents. Have you got well-documented processes? What's your data governance look like for certain use cases? What state's your org in? What state's your implementation's in? And do you have an implementation life cycle that can cycle in days? Because agents are going to go around this cycle relatively quickly. And you can't just go, oh, just do it in production, it won't make any difference. Okay? Yeah, you need to put it through a life cycle, but you can't go, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to take the agent down for 3 days because we now need to do a rev. Because you've now replaced some of the humans that were doing that job. So again, we've got a very different level. We've almost got a real-time, almost on type situation. So we need to, I've always said that agents punish mediocrity. Okay? If you're not really good, it shows you up really quickly. Okay? If you're good, it makes you way better. So the A in AI is augment. The best things get better, the worst things get worse. So that's, I think, some of the things, even if you're not thinking about agents, they're the things which we ought to be doing, getting your act together now and making sure you're ready. And again, I know you can't fix the entire company, but think about the use cases and focus on those areas and get those things right. Can't do that. That's really interesting, actually. No, I'll talk about that rather than... We've been trying to do this for about 8 years. Everyone, whenever they've seen a process diagram drawn in our product, people go, oh, that's amazing. Did it draw it for you automatically? And we went, no. How could it do that? How could it possibly know? We've now, because we collect all the metadata about how systems work, our chief product officer about 6 months ago said to our CTO, I think I can take all of that and make it build diagrams. And our CTO went, no, you'll never make that work. So last week they delivered it. Now, Adrian, our CTO, claims that was a management technique to encourage the CPO to go and do it, rather than doubt. But it took 4 of our top developers about 4 months to build, and the spec was 60 pages. And I think the reason it's interesting is what it does is it takes all of the way the system works, and then it builds a process diagram to tell you how your application works. Fascinating when it comes out. Our team went, well, that's not how it works. I went, it is. And wow, look at the security breaches that are potential there, because I didn't realize what we're building on. So it exposed a hell of a lot of things. The reason I think it's interesting is it's mostly code, but it's front-ended by AI, where you can have a conversation that says, tell me how commissions work, and it's back-ended by AI that takes all the data and turns it into a process diagram. So it's a lovely combination of both AI and code. Interesting use case. We had a customer who was an insurance company. She said, I've just spent $500,000 with Deloitte doing that manually, and you've just shown me in 5 minutes. Okay? And that's busy work for Deloitte. I mean, that's not value added. It's sitting there trying to work out how stuff works, draw a diagram, and then you know it's instantly out of date. So there's some interesting things about what you can now do if you've got, I mean, the data is accurate. You may not like it. It's an accurate representation of how your company works. You may not like that, but it is accurate. And then we can represent it, and then you can understand from a compliance perspective, understand what to do from, say, both process improvement, from a training perspective. So it's process mining, but also added on top of that, it's this idea about how do things work. So what I wanted to leave you with is one sentence, or 2 sentences. Change is hard, and we had that at the beginning, you know, with your hands. Being irrelevant is even worse. And I think we're moving into a new world where the sorts of skills that we need are the business analysis skills. They're not coding skills, so they are how do things work, business analysis. They are the people skills, which actually is engaging senior management on why this is a good use case. So all of those people skills are the ones that are most important. Learning how to talk to executives. There are plenty of people who can do the techie stuff around how agents work, but getting agents to work properly is all about business analysis and understanding where you get the benefits. So as I said, change is hard, becoming irrelevant is even worse. So So thank you so much for spending time with me.